going to do this. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Why Am I Yelling Live? Happy New Year. I am Krista Rizzo, and I am your host. I'm super excited to be back. I know we took a couple of weeks off for the holidays. We are back in full swing, and it is raining in New York City, so I'm trying to figure out this lighting. It's a little bit crazy today, but I'm really excited to kick off this new year with my host today, Rachel Braun Scherl. She is a business strategist, a speaker, and she has written a best-selling book, and it is called Orgasmic Leadership. And I cannot wait to talk about this. It's profiting from the coming surge in women's sexual and health and wellness. I'm going to let her talk about it because I can't wait to learn more about it and then read it. So welcome to the show, Rachel. Thank you for being here.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I am so excited to learn more about you because I love this idea. I love the topic, women's health and their sexual health and wellness and all that stuff has been, a big topic of conversation in the last several years.
Absolutely.
So I want to know how you got into this business, how you started this, and what prompted you to write this book and why.
Okay, so I spent my career building brands and businesses, both for myself and for other people. I started my career at Johnson & Johnson on the Tylenol brand, and since then have worked on products that cover women's lives from the tops of their heads to the tips of their toes. So hair care, skin care, oral care, fertility, infertility, psoriasis, foot fungus, menstruation, and all that in between. And my focus has always been on driving top line growth. So that means getting your customer, your patient, your doctor, your insurance company, whatever it is, whoever the ultimate buyer is, to engage in a transaction.
Right.
So I've always been in and around this space of marketing and business growth. About 11 years ago, a venture capitalist showed us a business plan for a product that improved arousal, desire, and satisfaction for women, regardless of age and life stage. And as we say, an accidental vagipreneur was born. We looked at that business. We were initially presented the business as an investment opportunity. We were really business builders. My business partner of 20 years, Mary Yench, and I, ultimately over the course of that summer, the asset became available. So we bought it and built a business. And when I say what made me do that, what made us do that, a couple of things. When you're in marketing or brand building or probably business in general, you're looking for something that's emotionally engaging. And in the dozens, if not hundreds of categories I've worked in, I've yet to find something that's more emotionally engaging than sexuality and intimacy.
Yes.
But from a business perspective, it was really the perfect storm. So here we had a product that worked. It was clinically proven. The founder had done clinical studies, meeting a huge unmet need. 43% of women at some point in their lives have sexual concerns and difficulties. That's a lot. That's more than the percentage of men who actually suffer from ED, erectile dysfunction. We didn't have a language. At that point, we were 10 years into a world with erectile dysfunction drugs, and we were schooled in bigger, longer, stronger, and 4-hour erections, and that language doesn't really translate for women.
That's not attractive for anybody. Oh, by the way.
And one of the most fascinating things about it was that we were finding that women didn't have a place to go to talk about this. So where traditionally in many, many other products, you talk to your sister, you talk to your partner, you talk to your friend, husband, mother, daughter, who knows, whatever the case may be. And our experience was very, very few people were talking at all and asking the important questions about this topic. And even more concerning, at that time, only 3 to 5% of obstetricians and gynecologists were talking to their patients about sexual enjoyment. So it was essentially a perfect storm. You had a product that worked, a high need, lack of conversation, the ability to create a conversation. And literally what we found very early on is when we were in the environment where we could have that conversation, we always jokingly refer to it as like a Who concert. We were stampeded. We were bombarded by questions. And even though we come at it from the business angle, as opposed to I'm not a deliverer of healthcare services, there is just such an unbelievable pent up desire to have these important conversations and to create an environment where the conversations could take place.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything. It's true. I don't know how old you are, but I'm of an age where it's not something that it was a major conversation in any of our lives. And I love how all of these topics are conversations now. I don't have daughters, I have sons, right? So, my girlfriends who have girls, like like these conversations are more open, they're more honest, they're truthful. It's everyone's talking about their period, everyone's talking about having sex, everyone's talking about all this stuff.
Saying that, Krista, that's just remarkable that you say everybody's talking about their periods. That represents such
huge
progress over the past few years. And there now are concepts like period beauty, like period comfort, that we're giving people the words and the language and the opportunity to talk about this, because I am older than you and my children are older than you. I have one boy and one girl, or one man and one woman at this point. Yes. And one of the things that's really amazing, and it seems to be across many cultures in the US, and people come from extremely different backgrounds and have very, very different relationships with sex and intimacy and the role that they play, that fact that these conversations are happening more and more often is absolutely a result of the many entrepreneurs who are creating products and conversations in the space where there weren't before. Totally. And I don't know what your experience is with your kids, but there's just a percentage, less than 50% of the states in the country require sex ed, and a subset of those don't even require it to be factually accurate. You mix in that, the ubiquity of porn, lack of conversation, discomfort with sex, and you wind up with people with all kinds of information. And I'm not suggesting that porn in and of itself is bad, and consent between adults and all that, and people not being hurt.
Yes,
that's a personal choice.
Messages. Yes.
But the point is that it makes it even more difficult to have the conversation. So it's been left to these entrepreneurs who are creating conversations and coming up with solutions that didn't exist. And what's particularly amazing about this space, and I'll get to the book, but I've worked with many people in the space, and I am a person in the space. A very large percentage of the people who start these businesses start out with a problem, look around for solutions, don't see one, create one, and say, wow, this is a great solution. I think I can make a business out of this because there are millions of other people who have the same experience. So, one of my favorite examples is this entrepreneur, Amy Buckhalter, who founded the company Pulse, which is basically an elevated way to integrate the hands-free, touch-free device and very well-designed, beautiful, natural lubricants. And it has applications in other categories. And when I first met her, she told me the story that she started experiencing the symptoms of menopause, and she looked around and she didn't see great products. So she hired a PhD and interviewed 300 women. And I always laugh every time I tell that story. I said, that's not what most people do. Most people will say, oh, I'm experiencing symptoms of menopause, I'll hire a PhD and interview 300 women. But there's so many stories in the space of people like that who have come up with solutions that are very much connected to their personal experience. The way the book came about is one of the big challenges that we've had, and that I've had, and that many companies still have, is the ability to get the message out in the channels and on the channels that you want. So 10 years ago, when we first tried to do this, we went out to cable stations, networks, websites, radio stations, and 95% of them said, no, we won't take your advertising.
Wow.
Which is, and it's still quite a big issue for a number of folks. So it was in response to that business challenge that I started really becoming quite vocal about the topic. The idea being, if we can't buy awareness, we're gonna create it. We can buy advertising space where we could create our own messages and control essentially what it is we wanted to say, that we were going to create these conversations through the public domain. And so that's what we did. And we started this conversation that was about the disparity between men and women's advertising. But we kept facing this issue. And as I said, it's still an issue today. And I remember being at a conference, and I met a woman, and I said, wow, she's incredibly smart. We were in unrelated businesses. And she said, at that point, I was doing a lot of speaking on leadership and entrepreneurship, and with a lot of emphasis on female health. And she says, Rachel, everybody talks about leadership. Why don't you talk about it in the context of what you do? What about orgasmic leadership? And I said, her name is Karen Kahn, and I credit her in the book. I said, that's the greatest name I ever heard, but no one's
Yes.
hiring me to talk about orgasmic leadership. When I get there, when I'm with news media, when I'm with clients, everybody wants to hear about the stories about female sexual health, but they're very uncomfortable with advertising that in any way, or sending an email, or inviting people to an event at a large company. But when I get there, they're interested in talking about it. I said, but it's a great name. A couple months later, it just literally occurred to me that it was a book. So I reached out to about half a dozen people that I knew in the space. And as I said, there's just amazing, dynamic, smart people in the space, with a structured interview. And by the end of it, I had interviewed over 36 entrepreneurs, academics, healthcare practitioners, people in the space, investors, and talked about the challenges and the solutions people have come up with, myself included, to build businesses in this space in the context of existing business trends. So it's really a book about leadership with a focus on female sexual health. So what can you do now? What is available now with changes in technology, all kinds of technology, whether it's, the development of apps, whether it's distribution technology, whether it's materials technology. How have entrepreneurs taken advantage of that to create businesses?
Yes.
New definitions around creativity and social change. So, for instance, one of my favorite stories of one of the entrepreneurs that I had the opportunity to meet and profile in the book. We all know the old buy a pair of shoes, give a pair of shoes, which is a brilliant model.
Yep.
There's an entrepreneur in the book who I actually met because I read about her in my school's alumni magazine, and she clearly was at school, dozens of years after I was. And she had grown up in relative privilege in India and had always been incredibly struck by how difficult it was for women in the slums of Mumbai to do many things, but certainly bathroom facilities and privacy administration. So her solution was she created a business where she not only created products that would work and could be disposed of in that environment, but she taught people how to sell. So now they know how to make the product so that they can service their personal mental health, and they know how to sell the product. One of the important things to remember, and it's a fairly well-known statistic, is that girls and women in developing countries miss up to 7 to 10 days of work or school every month because they don't have access to protection. So the idea that now you can make sure they're able to go where they need to go, they can get educated, they can make the product, they can solve their own needs, and they can build a business and potentially provide an economic engine to be to have different opportunities than they do, is just so brilliant. And besides the fact that she's been very successful and she's gotten a lot of well-deserved publicity, in 2016, she was recognized as the Glamour College Woman of the Year. And at that event, there was a woman who was famous, who became even more famous, who said, wow, that's really interesting. I'd like to meet you. I'd like to come see your facility in India, which she did. Subsequently, that woman who had expressed an interest, who had been in social causes, announced that she was marrying Prince Harry. So now this woman had been
of course. Now it's Meghan Markle is
now a duchess and has a world stage. And at the time of their wedding, they said, in lieu of gifts, please make a donation to any of these 7 organizations, of which Suhani's was one.
Amazing.
And then she got invited to the royal wedding and she went.
Oh my God.
But it's just an example of seeing a need, coming up with solution, and figuring out a way to have a social impact that's even bigger. Years ago, there were very few brands that had social impact as part of their role. And for many years, people liked it, but it wasn't a decision-making criteria. Certainly now for the Gen Zs and millennials, they're building businesses that have that built in. They expect it, and they're not just nonprofits. They're saying, I'm going to make money so I can have an impact in the areas that I want. And there's nothing wrong with making the money and using the money to fund it. So for many other female sexual health businesses, for every tampon sold, they give a tampon away. For every bra sold, they donate a bra to someone who's homeless. So or who doesn't have access to appropriate bras and undergarments. So one of the reasons that this space remains so fascinating is the kinds of solutions that people are coming up with. and the ways they're designing them and the businesses that they're creating are just so interesting and so much more multidimensional than we saw even, let's say, 15 years ago.
Yes, agreed. And it's part of the reason why I do this little series, right? You and I belong
I love
to.
the name, by the way, because
thanks. Why am I yelling?
A loud voice, and people have said that to me on occasion.
My whole life.
I'm speaking enthusiastically.
Yes, that's what it is. But we met through a collective that we both belong to. It's called the Female Founder Collective, and it was founded by Rebecca Minkoff, the famous fashion designer, and her partner, business partner. I guess they're business partners. I don't even know, Elizabeth Leonard. So I have had the pleasure of meeting so many women who are doing these kinds of things. A few weeks ago, I talked to a girl, Anya, who started a business around produce that is cast off by companies that don't want it, right?
I remember
she's helping like feed New York City because she's like, who cares if your red pepper has a little, divot in it? Like, it's not, the flesh isn't,
but a person.
Yes. Yeah. But thinking outside the box like that is so fascinating to me. And it's not something that I was taught as a child growing up, and you probably weren't taught it as a child growing up. It was like we just had to wait for things to happen instead of going out and making them happen. And that's what I think is so wonderful about the newer generations coming up. And they're like, no, we can figure out how to fix this. So, how do we continue to do that? With innovation and dynamic and marketing. Now, you're a marketing expert, right? So talk to me about getting your product out there in an algorithmically challenging platform. I just read this morning. Algorithmically I have a friend this morning who posted in her Facebook group, and I used to be on Facebook like a maniac, and I have stepped away from there because it's like, I'm not spending $300 a month or a week on advertising just so people can see who I am. It's not in my budget, and I'm not doing it, right? And she was talking about it this morning that apparently there's another new algorithm on Facebook about, looking at people's profiles and having to do 2 extra steps instead of being able to see things. And so I want to know from somebody who is in the business, who knows all about marketing, who knows about this stuff, because I don't, if you have a product out there, or if you have a passion that you want to bring out socially to the world, how do you find a way around that or through it, or how do you make it work in your favor?
So I just want to sort of reinforce the challenge, how algorithmically challenging this is. So in female sexual health, the algorithm for erectile dysfunction comes under family planning. And for women, it's considered more sexual in nature for anything that relates to menopause or vaginas or lubricants.
Right.
So the algorithms are applied as they're written, but underlying how they're written is a lot of subjectivity. So there's no one solution. Lots of people have found workarounds. Unfortunately, in my experience in many of the companies I work with on Facebook, the workaround often involves being so vague about your product that in order to get the ad approved, that it's difficult to communicate. But social media has been enormous. And I mean social media almost separate and apart from Facebook. These women's networks or communities of any kind, you share products. So almost any other channel. Now, obviously, all of them, Twitter, Instagram, everybody has made it more difficult for female sexual health, which is just fascinating because the porn business doesn't seem to have those restrictions. People have found workarounds with the language. Many of us have been involved with conversations with larger companies that have more clout with Facebook and have been part of groups that go in and speak to their legal department. Some people have done it by straight PR, by talking about the disparity. So there's a bunch of different ways to skin the cat. And the challenge that you point out is that the rules are changing often. So it's a constant challenge. And what I found consistently works is being able to have this conversation on a platform. And I mean that in the broadest sense, whether it's on a stage, whether it's in a community, whether it's through a social media campaign where you're able to have the conversation in an environment that's comfortable and you can explore and ask questions.
Yep.
I do a lot of work where I'll bring in other people who have worked with businesses in menopause or some other category, and we'll get 40, 50 women in the room and talk to them about the options for treating particular symptoms of menopause.
Right.
And I'll have a doctor on the panel, and I'll have people in businesses, and I'll represent some businesses. And literally the enthusiasm and the energy and the interest that people have when you're able to create that environment is pretty remarkable. Obviously, it's not scalable to do them all in person. So people have built communities and do have access. It just isn't always through the front door, if you will.
Yeah.
For instance, one of the companies that I work with now, Nanomolecular, has a brand called Vela, which is a lubricant essentially with CBD. And there are lots of products with CBD. This one was designed by one of the primary investigators behind Viagra and Cialis. So someone who understands about male and female sexual function. I don't know if everybody knows Viagra was studied for years and years and years for female sexual health. And what they've done is they've created a product that actually has clinical demonstration of efficacy of improving arousal and orgasm. When I hear about products like that or get to interact with, and that is amazing now, because whenever I talk about Bella, people say, where can I get it? Look at Nanomolecular, and it's being launched in retail also as we speak. Or the product that I talked about, Pulse, that Amy founded, or skincare designed specifically for women who are going through menopause. You just have to keep creating these conversations in communities, and obviously online is much more efficient. And oftentimes going into existing communities. You referred to the one where we met each other. Rebecca has created this environment, and every day there's a conversation about something where people are either offering or asking for something and access to different things. And that's really an enormous part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think we have, in the last, it's funny, we're walking into a new decade, right? But like the last decade for me, I felt was a very unconnected decade. We got so, we became so reliant on these things, and we stopped talking to each other. And it's funny. And then, when I left my company, when I was working in corporate many years ago, to start my own business, I realized that what we were missing was connection. We were getting so distracted, and we were not networking, and we were not having these conversations, and we were building these online communities, but we weren't going out and like really bonding, if you will, right? It was all for the likes and the comments and all the things. So for the last, I would say 12 to 18 months for me personally, getting out there and having conversations with other women, with other entrepreneurs, with other men who are supportive of what other people are doing has really opened my eyes and educated me.
Yeah.
I feel like I am in a constant, education cycle. All I do is learn about new stuff every single day. And it's amazing though, because this is not something that I knew 10 years ago. This is not something I knew like even 5 years ago when I had just started my business. So for the availability for this kind of stuff to be out there now, it's so important for people that are, in need of something to just ask for it. I mean, we're so afraid to ask for help. That was like one of my big things when I left my job. It was like, I didn't want to ask anybody to help me get better or help change, right? And then I realized I can't do this all by myself. And so once we realize we can't do that, and we have resources at our disposal that don't necessarily have to cost an arm and a leg, right? Like we're in this collective, and people ask, we barter for stuff. We price slash for the girls, and we do this and we do that because we want to help others. We're not in this to like make the big bucks. I mean, we are, but we're not, right? There's like, donate one, keep one, donate one, keep one. It's like that. I feel like
an important point. It's really okay to donate one and keep one and still make money. I think oftentimes, certainly women, I've spoken to many entrepreneurs, they say, I'm going to make it a nonprofit. And I say, that's certainly a route that you can go, but you can also make it a profitable company that has social impact. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Going back to what you said about connection, and so much has been written about that. there's some research that's been going on in the past year or so that people are having less sex. And there's a couple of different explanations. One is, for instance, that the way we've traditionally defined it and the way the survey is being done doesn't include all these other activities that people are now engaging in. So it might be we're having just as much that it looks different. That's one option. Another is that the phone, the kind of connectivity has two implications. One is we're staring at our phone all day, so we're not talking to humans. And the second is that we're less facile at having human conversations because of the fact that we're looking at our phone. So there's just so many implications when you talk about connectivity, especially as it relates to female sexual health. Now, being connected can also be a great source of information, and you can learn things and you can be in conversations. And I think one of the challenges right now, when everybody's looking at this, is it is somewhat difficult in many categories to figure out what's fact and fiction, what's a good resource, what's not a good resource. Which is why something like this collective that we're in, there's this automatic assumption of trust.
Yeah.
That by virtue of buying into this idea that you want to be known as a female-founded company, so if that's important to people, they can vote with their currency. They can say, well, if this product is available from company A, which may or may not have diverse management, and this product is available from company B that maybe has a woman or an even more diverse group or people of color, whatever the case may be, I can make the choice to buy that product.
Yes.
And with that kind of information, we can make a lot more choices. And the bottom line is, it's good for business. I mean, it is good for business to give people the information so that they can make choices. You know, going back to some of the products that I work with, people like to know that something is clinically proven.
Yep.
Whatever that means, and there are a lot of different definitions. But the idea that there's evidence that Velo improves orgasm and arousal, that's good.
Yeah.
The fact that, you know, when Amy talks about her product, that 95% of her ratings are 5-star on Amazon, that's great. That's information that people can take into account and decide if that's relevant and they want to make a purchase. But the idea, and I just love this idea, why am I yelling? Because every time someone says to me now, why am I yelling? I said, oh, were you on that podcast also? Is the importance of having these conversations and sharing information, and still with the ubiquity of information, finding resources that you have some reason to trust.
Yes. And I think, you know, trust plays a big factor in it. I think, you know, comfortability is a big deal. I think, you know, my consumer habits have changed in the last decade or more, only because, you know, I like to know the people who I'm buying from. I like to do my research. I'm a local shopper. I have my own business, so I know that how important that is, right? And so creating these kinds of themes or ideas and putting it out there and allowing people to make those kinds of choices is really important. And I think on a whole, it's funny, my son goes to a school in New York City, the High School for Environmental Studies. So they are very socially and globally aware of what is happening. Like, they have a feminist club, and I'm like, I cannot, he's a freshman, so I can't wait to like get my fingers in there and like move in, basically. And he's like, Mom, like, what are you doing?
In any school that I went to growing up.
Well, I should have that. You know what? I'm going to have them reach out to you, because I think this would be a great conversation for you to go and talk to their school. But we never had that when we were in high school. We didn't have that. I didn't have that really I went to an art school. So yes, we had that in college, but not like the way that they do now. And I think that, you know, teaching our kids and these younger generations, I mean, yours are older than mine. I have a teenager and a little one. And so just having them know that their mom, like, this is what she does, and this is what she's interested in. And then she's friends with all these other people who do all these great things. And they're making more choices available to us as we get older. And so that's very exciting to me. It's not inhibiting.
Yeah, the funny thing, there's just so many funny stories being in the space.
Sure.
When I started doing this, my kids were young, and now one's out of college and one's in college. And I remember my youngest, when he went to college, just thinking, okay, no one's going to know what my mom does now. And then one of his friends from high school went to college with him, and his mom sent him a picture of the book. So then he showed it to all the friends at school. He's like, I can't get away from this whole vagina thing.
Right.
You keep catalyzing thoughts. One of the things you said that's so important is this idea of language. And I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
And specifically in female sexual and reproductive health, although clearly other places as well. And when I'm talking to investors or people who are, for whatever reason, not interested in sexual health, and I say, listen, you don't have to be interested in it because it's the right thing to do or because you care about humanity or anything else. There's certain conversations where I'm really focused on, you should be interested in it because you're a business person and this is a great business opportunity. Absolutely. But one of the things that's always compelling to people is this growing body of research that suggests that young boys and girls who are taught the right names for their genitals and their body parts and how they fit together and what they're capable of doing are more likely to report instances of abuse or trauma. So if you're not interested for any other reason, everybody's interested in the next generation. So I think that's pretty compelling. And regardless of what motivates you to have the conversation, the conversation is so important. And many people who grew up, and again, I'm older than you are, weren't necessarily raised. Luckily, I grew up in a very good family, weren't raised with the language or the skills.
Right.
And I remember when my son was young and I was driving him to elementary school, and it was the day they were giving out, the pads for the girls and the uniforms for the boys and talking to them about puberty.
7th or 8th grade or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this was 4th grade.
Wow.
And remember he said, I don't think I really want to go to school today. I'm not interested in having this conversation. And I said, I'm pretty sure never in the history of the world is there a 4th grader who's done to school to have this conversation, but it's critically important. And they're not happening often enough. And when they are happening, sometimes it's with misinformation. You can't be in this space about sexual and reproductive health without people's political views and moral views and ethical views and cultural experiences weighing into it. There are cultures where sex is only between a man and a woman who is born and identify as a man and a woman, and it's all about procreation. That's one very narrow definition, but it certainly doesn't cover even close to everybody in terms of the range of how people identify, the reasons that people engage in intimacy, and what that intimacy looks like. So much of the work was done historically on male-female heterosexual interaction. Yeah. And clearly that's not all there is. There's so much more.
Right.
And the spectrum, the idea of gender fluidity is an idea we didn't grow up with, but it's and common, and we're starting to have these conversations, but we have a long way to go.
A long way to go. And I think
I am yelling.
Yeah, I love it. And that's why you're here. And I know that we could probably talk about this for like hours and hours and days. But our time is unfortunately up. So you stay right there, so we can chat in just a minute. But I want to watch everybody, say thank you to everybody who's watching. And if you are catching the replay of this, please share this, because this is a really important conversation that we need to be having. For our kids, for ourselves. I am of the age where menopause is creeping up on me. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to have to be learning about myself as we go through this. Yes. But I just can't help but think about, the teenagers in my life that I know, and the women who are going through what I'm going to be going through in the next 5 or 10 years, and, everybody in between, right? And it's not all about the women. It's about the men and the women, and all of us supporting each other and doing all the right things and having these conversations. So I thank you, Rachel, first for having this conversation, first of all, and for bringing this to light. Go out and buy her book. And I'm going to put all the links in the comments so you guys all have access to her. Follow her and find out where she is and hire her to speak for your people, because this is really important.
You're very kind.
So stay right there. Thank you, everybody. And we will be back here next week with another great conversation.